From city streets to ocean depths, plastic waste is everywhere. Every bottle, bag, and wrapper we toss adds to a global crisis choking our planet. But how did we get here, and is there a way out? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more environmental insights that matter. Today, we're uncovering the real journey of plastic and why it's everyone's problem. 1. The rise of plastic waste. Plastic production skyrocketed after World War II, changing the way products were made worldwide. By the 1960s, mass production made plastic a cheap and flexible choice for packaging and consumer goods. Today, global plastic production exceeds 400 million tons annually, with volumes continuing to rise. Over 50% of all plastic is made for single-use purposes, discarded after just minutes of use. Common throwaways include bottles, bags, wrappers, utensils, and food containers used once then tossed. Developing economies face the worst consequences with limited recycling or waste control systems. As consumption grows, countries export their plastic waste abroad to avoid processing it domestically. Plastic waste is rarely recycled because sorting, cleaning, and processing are costly and inefficient. Landfills overflow with decades of plastic that will take hundreds of years to fully decompose. Plastic pollution now touches every continent, ocean, and ecosystem across the entire planet Earth. The durability that once made plastic valuable now makes it a persistent global environmental threat. Burning plastic creates toxic air emissions, adding respiratory damage to environmental destruction. Tiny fragments called microplastics now exist in soil, snow, water, and even deep ocean trenches. Cities, coastlines, and rivers all serve as main transport routes for plastic into marine ecosystems. Every item discarded improperly has the potential to end up in the bellies of fish or seabirds. From its birth as a convenience, plastic has now become a burden impossible to fully control. Governments struggle to regulate plastic production due to industry pressure and public dependency. Plastic is now deeply embedded in agriculture, medicine, fashion, electronics, and daily packaging. Solving the plastic crisis means unlearning decades of unsustainable habits and manufacturing trends. Understanding how plastic became a global issue is the first step toward turning the tide of waste. 2. Single-use plastic culture. The rise of a disposable culture began with the promise of ease, hygiene, and throwaway convenience. Plastic forks, straws, bottles, and bags replaced reusable items across homes and food industries. By the 1980s, fast food chains and supermarkets made plastic packaging the default across products. People grew accustomed to discarding containers after one use, rarely considering the consequences. Single-use plastics now account for over half of ocean-bound waste collected in environmental studies. Convenience culture reinforces the idea that disposability equals modern living and time efficiency. Corporate branding promotes on-the-go packaging as part of an aspirational lifestyle of efficiency. Plastic wrapping dominates everything from fruit to electronics, sometimes doubling product volume. The growth of e-commerce worsens the issue, with layers of bubble wrap and film in every shipment. Public events, festivals, and sports venues generate tons of waste through single-use plastic items. Even eco-conscious consumers fall into the trap of daily convenience over sustainable habits. Plastic water bottles alone contribute millions of tons of waste to global landfills and waterways. Though recyclable, most single-use plastics are not recycled due to contamination or low market value. Efforts to ban items like straws or bags help, but they only address a fraction of total waste. Single-use plastic reflects a mindset problem. That convenience matters more than environmental cost. Solving the crisis means reshaping behavior at individual, corporate, and policy-making levels. Culture must shift toward reuse, refill, and repair instead of constant purchase and disposal. Small daily choices, multiplied by billions, create enormous planetary consequences over time. A new generation must embrace long-term thinking to replace decades of wasteful convenience culture. Ending single-use plastic starts with acknowledging that every throwaway choice is a global one. 3. Plastic and ocean currents. Once plastic enters rivers, it follows water currents into oceans and massive rotating gyres of waste. 5 major ocean gyres, large swirling currents, act as convergence zones for floating plastic debris. The most infamous is the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, stretching over 1.6 million square kilometers. Plastic rides the Gulf Stream, Kuroshio, and other currents until trapped within circular ocean flows. These currents cause lightweight plastic to spiral and collect, forming thick layers of floating trash. Fishing gear, packaging, and household waste swirl alongside microplastic particles in ocean gyres. Plastic breaks down under sunlight into smaller fragments, but it never fully biodegrades or vanishes. Wind, tides, and surface tension carry floating debris thousands of miles from its original location. Ghost nets from fishing vessels entangle marine life and continue catching prey long after being lost. Currents carry plastic across borders, meaning pollution created in one nation affects others globally. Plastic is often mistaken for food by marine species like sea turtles, whales, and seabirds in transit. Ingested plastic causes malnutrition, starvation, internal injury, and death for millions of animals. Plastics also attract toxic pollutants like PCBs, which enter the food chain through ocean consumption. Coral reefs suffer when plastic debris settles on them, introducing disease and blocking sunlight. Beaches far from cities are now littered with international waste, carried by waves and gyres. The ocean has no borders, and plastic follows currents that cross continents and cultures alike. Cleaning plastic from ocean gyres is costly, dangerous, and often ineffective at removing small pieces. Stopping plastic at the source before it reaches water is the only viable long-term solution available. We must understand how ocean currents trap plastic to see how far our waste really travels. Currents do not forget plastic, and neither should we as we choose what we discard each day. 4. Rivers, the plastic superhighways. Rivers serve as the main transport route carrying plastic from land to sea in every part of the world. Studies show that just 10 major rivers are responsible for most of the plastic entering the oceans. The Yangtze, Ganges, Nile, and Amazon are among the top contributors to marine plastic pollution. Urban centers without waste management dump trash directly into rivers flowing through cities. Stormwater and floods wash litter into storm drains and riverbanks, especially in low-income areas. Rivers pass through densely populated zones, industrial sites, and farmland with high plastic use. Plastic carried by rivers includes bags, foam, wrappers, microbeads, and broken packaging fragments. Many rivers flow into coastal regions already suffering from pollution and biodiversity loss. Once in rivers, plastic is rarely recovered, swept out to sea by tidal movement and strong flow. Floating waste forms mini islands in river bends, choking ecosystems and harming native species. Wildlife in rivers like otters, fish, and birds ingest plastic just as their oceanic counterparts do. Riverbeds become clogged with debris, increasing flood risk and reducing water flow in dry seasons. Plastic film and bottles often wrap around tree roots, mangroves, and aquatic vegetation. Sewage systems overwhelmed by waste release plastic pellets and fragments through water outfalls. Rural areas without landfills use rivers as open dumping sites, compounding pollution daily. Cleaning river plastic requires catch nets, floating barriers, and community cleanup efforts. Governments must monitor river health as a key part of their environmental protection policies. Rivers connect local actions to global consequences, making their protection essential worldwide. If we want to save our oceans, we must first stop the plastic that pours in from polluted rivers. Rivers are the veins of the planet, and they are being clogged by plastic every single day. 5. Microplastics everywhere. Microplastics are plastic fragments less than 5 millimeters in size, but present nearly everywhere today. They form when larger plastics break down through sunlight, friction, or oceanic and soil processes. Microbeads are a subcategory added to products like face wash, toothpaste, and exfoliating scrubs. Most countries now ban microbeads, but billions still exist in waterways and aquatic food systems. Fibers from synthetic clothes shed during laundry and flow into water through household drains. Tire wear releases microplastic dust onto roads, which washes into rivers and soils during rainfall. Carpets, paints, furniture, and packaging slowly degrade, releasing fragments into indoor air. We now breathe, drink, and eat microplastics through water, salt, seafood, vegetables, and milk. Samples taken from snow in the Arctic and water from the Mariana Trench show microplastic presence. Human placentas, lungs, and blood have tested positive for microplastics in alarming medical studies. Plastic particles absorb toxins and carry them deep into our bodies through invisible daily exposure. Microplastics harm plankton, the base of the marine food web, reducing global oxygen and biodiversity. Animals ingest plastic instead of food, leading to bioaccumulation across the food chain globally. Sewage plants cannot filter out the smallest particles, allowing them to pass into rivers and oceans. Even drinking water from plastic bottles adds microscopic plastic fibers to the human diet. Solutions must include better wastewater filtration and biodegradable material development. Reducing plastic usage at the source is more effective than trying to clean microplastic pollution. Every piece of plastic ever made still exists somewhere, often as tiny, invisible dust around us. Microplastics are proof that plastic does not disappear. It just becomes smaller, harder to see. The tiniest plastics may become the largest threat to future health, ecosystems, and food chains. 6. Wildlife under threat. Plastic poses one of the greatest threats to wildlife on land, in rivers, and across marine habitats. Turtles mistake floating bags for jellyfish, swallowing them and suffering from internal blockages. Seabirds pick up colorful plastic pieces, feeding them to chicks who die from starvation or rupture. Fish ingest microplastics believing they are food, leading to toxins accumulating in their bodies. Plastic fragments have been found in the stomachs of whales, dolphins, and even deep-sea creatures. Entanglement is another danger. Nets, ropes, and straps wrap around limbs, wings, and necks of animals. Marine mammals drown when trapped in discarded fishing gear or heavy plastic waste underwater. Coral reefs are damaged by plastic contact, which introduces bacteria and blocks critical sunlight. Land animals like elephants and cows consume plastic in garbage dumps mixed with food waste piles. Plastic shards slice internal organs or accumulate over time, making digestion impossible for animals. Ghost gear lost fishing nets can trap and kill hundreds of animals over decades without detection. Plastic waste disturbs breeding grounds, interrupts migration, and changes animal feeding behavior. Species already endangered now face another barrier to recovery due to widespread plastic pollution. Zooplankton, the base of the marine food web, show signs of developmental damage from plastic intake. As animals consume plastic, humans higher up the food chain eat those same contaminants in seafood. Studies show microplastic presence in shellfish, sea salt, honey, and many agricultural products. Protecting biodiversity means removing plastic threats from every level of every natural system. The web of life is unraveling due to pollution that chokes, poisons, and starves animals globally. Without urgent intervention, entire species may vanish because of synthetic waste we cannot digest. Plastic pollution is not only a litter problem, it is a full-scale attack on Earth's living creatures. 7. Coastal communities impacted. Coastal communities suffer first and most from the devastating impacts of plastic pollution daily. Fishermen lose income when nets fill with garbage instead of fish, destroying marine productivity. Tourism suffers as once pristine beaches turn into plastic-filled coastlines covered in washed debris. Plastic clogs boat engines, damages propellers, and gets tangled in docks, harbors, and gear daily. Children living near polluted shores grow up surrounded by trash, with few options for clean play. Tides bring plastic back again even after beach cleanups, causing frustration among local residents. Traditional seafood diets become unsafe due to rising contamination from microplastic ingestion. Storm surges push trash into homes and streets, especially in low-lying or flood-prone settlements. Fishing communities report declining fish stocks as ecosystems degrade under the weight of waste. Women, often tasked with family care, face added burdens sourcing clean water and preparing safe food. Plastic waste accumulates fastest in communities with poor infrastructure and no waste collection. Many island nations now import plastic waste due to limited landfills, worsening local pollution. Rivers emptying into coasts deliver massive plastic loads, especially near megacities or factories. Youth in coastal villages are organizing cleanup movements but face lack of funding or tools. Fishing gear lost in storms returns months later, tangled in plastic bags and foam blocks. Plastic blocks mangrove roots, kills seagrass beds, and disrupts key nursery zones for marine life. Some coastal communities now face relocation due to repeated storm damage and worsening pollution. Plastic waste adds to other stressors like climate change, erosion, and ocean acidification combined. Justice demands support for frontline communities bearing the brunt of global plastic overproduction. Protecting coastal life requires removing plastic from the source to the shore without delay today. 8. Burning plastic dangers. Burning plastic is often seen as a quick fix, but it releases extremely toxic and harmful chemicals. When plastic is incinerated, it emits dioxins, furans, and other carcinogens into local air supplies. Open-air burning in poor areas or landfills leads to dense clouds of black smoke choking entire towns. Children near burning sites face higher risks of asthma, cancers, developmental delays, and illness. Plastic fumes contaminate crops, water, and skin through invisible airborne microtoxins released. Even controlled incineration requires expensive filtering systems to remove dangerous emissions. Most developing countries lack these systems, releasing untreated gases directly into communities. Plastic types like PVC and polystyrene emit especially toxic substances during combustion processes. Scavengers working near burn pits breathe in harmful air daily with little access to protection gear. Burning does not eliminate waste. It transforms solid trash into invisible, toxic airborne particles. Ash left behind contains heavy metals and microplastics, which leach into soil and groundwater layers. Incinerators often serve rich urban areas while their smoke drifts into rural or marginalized zones. Plastics burned in cement kilns release greenhouse gases that worsen global warming rapidly. Waste-to-energy plants claim to generate power, but often ignore health impacts on surrounding people. Burning masks the problem without solving it, keeping the cycle of production and pollution alive. Even advanced nations debate incineration versus recycling versus long-term waste reduction goals. The circular economy cannot include burning plastic, which contradicts sustainability principles. Communities must resist short-term fixes and demand solutions that prioritize public health first. Plastics must be reduced and reused, not destroyed in a way that poisons air and lungs long-term. Clean air is a basic right, and burning plastic denies that right to millions around the world today. 9. Recycling, the misleading myth. Recycling has long been sold as the answer to plastic waste, but its effectiveness is highly limited. Only 9% of plastic ever produced has actually been recycled globally in any meaningful way. Most plastics are made from complex polymers that cannot be recycled together without contamination. Plastic items must be sorted, cleaned, melted, and remolded, an expensive and energy-heavy process. Food residue, dyes, and mixed materials make most post-consumer plastic unfit for full reuse. Many recyclable items are simply burned or dumped after collection due to lack of processing plants. China once accepted the majority of plastic waste, but banned imports in 2018 due to contamination. Since then, Western countries have dumped waste in Southeast Asia, creating new environmental crises. Recycling labels mislead consumers into believing their waste will be reborn as useful goods again. In reality, plastic is often downcycled into lower quality materials and rarely reused multiple times. Only a small number of plastic types like PET bottles have any consistent, scalable recycling value. Recycling does not address overproduction and allows companies to keep making disposable products. Brands use green labels and recycling messages as marketing tactics without reducing actual waste. Municipal systems are overwhelmed, underfunded, and inconsistent in sorting plastic effectively. Plastic bags and films clog machines, halting recycling lines, and contaminating entire batches. Recycling remains a last resort, not a sustainable strategy compared to reduction and reuse models. We must reduce plastic creation and consumption rather than rely on outdated recycling infrastructure. The real myth is that plastic recycling alone can solve a problem created by unlimited production. It is not enough to sort our trash. We must stop making so much of it in the first place entirely. True change means moving from single-use models to circular, reusable, and regenerative systems now. 10. The invisible costs of plastic. Plastic appears cheap, But the hidden costs to society, health, and nature are staggering long-term. Governments pay billions each year to collect, haul, landfill, or incinerate growing plastic waste. Public health systems shoulder rising disease burdens linked to exposure from plastic pollution. Lost tourism revenue affects countries whose beaches are filled with trash from distant origins. Fisheries collapse as plastic ruins habitat and contaminates seafood, harming local economies. Animal rescue, ocean cleanup, and medical treatments add to the economic weight of plastic damage. Flooding from blocked drains due to plastic waste causes massive infrastructure repair expenses. The burden falls hardest on poor communities, who receive little support and face repeated exposure. Plastic is subsidized by fossil fuel interests, keeping production cheap despite long-term impacts. The extraction, refining, and molding of plastic all release harmful greenhouse gases into the air. Plastic waste harms industries dependent on clean environments like agriculture and aquaculture. Each bottle or bag may cost pennies, but the real toll is measured in poisoned water and sick lungs. Plastic pollution drives climate change, destroys ecosystems, and endangers human food security. The illusion of affordability distracts from the enormous compounding losses across generations. If we priced plastic based on its entire life cycle, few companies could afford their current output. Ending subsidies and taxing polluters can shift the market towards safer circular material use. The plastic industry externalizes cost while privatizing profit, a model that must be dismantled. Communities must demand transparency about plastic's true costs and long-term economic damage. Plastic is not cheap. It is just others who pay the price while companies count their profits freely. To fix the future, we must make the hidden costs of plastic visible to all and act accordingly now. 11. Plastic and climate change. Plastic is made from fossil fuels, and its entire life cycle contributes to rising global emissions. From oil extraction to petrochemical refining, plastic is deeply tied to carbon-intensive industries. Drilling and fracking for plastic feedstock releases methane, a gas far more potent than carbon dioxide. Refineries emit toxic air pollutants that worsen climate change and harm surrounding communities daily. Producing plastic consumes vast energy resources, mostly powered by coal and natural gas worldwide. Shipping plastic products around the globe adds emissions from diesel-powered trucks and freighters. Plastic incineration releases carbon dioxide, black carbon, and other greenhouse gases directly. Burning 1 ton of plastic can emit more than 2 tons of harmful carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Plastic waste in oceans disrupts plankton, which normally absorb carbon through photosynthesis. Plastics block light, alter ecosystems, and reduce the ocean's natural carbon capture function daily. Melting Arctic ice releases plastic microfibers stored in frozen layers, worsening global heating. As global temperatures rise, plastic degrades faster, leaking chemicals and fragmenting more rapidly. Climate-induced storms now push plastic waste farther and deeper into previously untouched regions. Flooded waste dumps release methane as organic and plastic materials rot in oxygen-deprived piles. Plastic's contribution to climate change is rarely visible, yet its impact grows every single year. The fossil fuel industry plans to increase plastic production as fuel demand declines with clean energy. Without action, plastic could account for up to 15% of global emissions by 2050. Tackling climate change means tackling plastic-reducing production and investing in clean materials. Sustainable futures require cutting off plastic at the source, not just managing its endless effects. Plastic and climate change are not separate issues, they are linked crises demanding joint solutions. 12. Microplastics everywhere. Microplastics are plastic particles smaller than 5 millimeters, found in air, water, and soil. These tiny fragments come from broken bottles, tires, clothing fibers, and degraded plastic waste. Washing machines release millions of synthetic microfibers with every single load of synthetic clothes. Car tires shed microplastic dust as they roll, which washes into storm drains and nearby water bodies. Cosmetics, toothpaste, and body scrubs used to contain microbeads that wash directly into the ocean. Even today, countries without bans still sell products that leak microplastics into natural systems. Microplastics have been discovered in rainwater, mountain snow, and Arctic ice thousands of miles away. Airborne particles float indoors and outdoors, making inhalation one of the main human exposure routes. Studies have detected microplastics in human blood, breast milk, lungs, placentas, and major organs. Ingestion occurs through food, water, and even the salt we sprinkle on our meals each day. Seafood, especially shellfish and filter feeders, contain high microplastic concentrations today. Plants absorb plastic from contaminated soils, and animals that eat them pass it along the chain. Microplastics absorb toxins like pesticides and heavy metals, making them dangerous chemical carriers. These plastics interfere with hormone systems, cause inflammation, and disrupt cellular health daily. Infants and children are especially vulnerable, as exposure begins even before birth through mothers. Wastewater treatment plants cannot fully filter microplastics, sending them into rivers and oceans. Laundry filters, textile regulations, and synthetic clothing bans are urgently needed across nations. Scientists race to understand the long-term health impact, but evidence already shows widespread harm. We cannot remove all microplastics from the environment, but we can stop creating more right now. This invisible pollution may be the most urgent threat hiding inside our air, food, and bodies today. 13. Plastic in the food chain. Plastic pollution is invading the global food chain from top to bottom, starting with tiny creatures. Plankton, the base of the oceanic food web, mistake microplastics for food and absorb their toxins. These plankton are eaten by small fish, which are then consumed by larger predators in succession. With every step up the food chain, plastic particles and toxins become more concentrated over time. By the time seafood reaches human plates, it often contains chemical-laden plastic inside its tissues. Shellfish are particularly vulnerable, as they filter large volumes of water and trap microplastics. Fish in markets have been found with plastic in their stomachs, gills, and even inside their flesh. Animals raised on contaminated feed may pass plastic exposure into eggs, milk, and meat products. Plastic wraps, containers, and utensils also leach chemicals into food, especially when heated. Bisphenol A and phthalates from packaging disrupt hormones and mimic estrogen inside human bodies. Plastic rice, made of synthetic resin, has been found in circulation in low-regulation food markets. Fruit and vegetables can absorb nano-sized plastic particles from soil or irrigation water sources. Food-grade plastics degrade over time, especially in sunlight, releasing toxins into what we eat. Rural communities using polluted rivers for irrigation unknowingly grow crops with plastic exposure. Chemicals from plastics accumulate in fatty tissues, where they remain stored for decades unchecked. These bioaccumulated toxins contribute to chronic illnesses, infertility, cancer, and immune damage. Global food security is at risk as plastic threatens agricultural, marine, and freshwater systems. The illusion of clean food disappears when plastic touches every layer of the food supply chain. Protecting human health means protecting the integrity of the natural systems that feed the world. Plastic has no place on our plates, and yet today, we may be eating it with every single meal we take. 14. Corporations and accountability. Global corporations play a major role in plastic pollution, yet few are held truly accountable today. Top multinational brands produce billions of tons of plastic annually through single-use packaging. These companies claim to support recycling while lobbying against bans on disposable plastic goods. Corporate greenwashing confuses consumers, masking harmful practices with eco-friendly marketing. Plastic bottles, wrappers, and sachets are manufactured cheaply, but cost the planet immeasurably. Brands outsource waste management to poor countries, exporting pollution under the name of recycling. Extended producer responsibility laws force companies to manage the waste they create. Few comply. Executives promise change at conferences, but plastic production continues to increase every year. Corporations oppose regulation, sue governments, and delay policy shifts through endless lobbying. Many push false solutions like chemical recycling or biodegradable plastics that rarely work at scale. Plastic-free alternatives exist, but companies claim they are too expensive or inconvenient to use. Investors and consumers rarely demand that brands stop producing waste, not just clean it up later. Audit reports show that a handful of companies are behind most of the branded trash found globally. Public pressure has forced a few shifts, but most firms still prioritize profit over environmental cost. Plastic waste is treated as a personal responsibility, not a corporate obligation to fix or prevent. Real accountability requires legislation, enforcement, and financial penalties for polluting behavior. Transparency reports must show where plastic is produced, how it is handled, and where it ends up. Voluntary pledges are not enough. Governments must regulate plastic use like any other pollutant. Every company selling plastic must take back what they sell and stop externalizing the burden. Without holding producers accountable, consumers will always be blamed for a crisis they did not cause. 15. Fast fashion's plastic problem. The fast fashion industry is a major source of plastic pollution most people do not even recognize yet. Cheap clothing is often made of synthetic materials like polyester, nylon, and acrylic blends today. These materials are essentially plastic fibers that shed microplastics during use and washing cycles. Every time you do laundry, synthetic clothes release millions of fibers into water treatment systems. Fast fashion produces massive waste. Unwanted clothing ends up in landfills or incinerators quickly. Many garments are worn only a few times before being discarded due to poor quality or shifting trends. Burned clothes release harmful gases, while buried textiles leach chemicals into surrounding soil. Exported clothing waste floods African and Asian nations, overwhelming local ecosystems and rivers. Synthetic garments take hundreds of years to decompose and pollute the environment during that time. Dyes and finishes used on plastic-based fabrics can contain lead, mercury, and toxic formaldehyde. Fashion marketing encourages overconsumption, driving massive production and disposal cycles. Greenwashing brands promote recycled plastic clothes, which still shed microfibers into the sea. Few countries regulate fashion waste, allowing companies to profit from pollution with no penalties. Textile factories dump untreated wastewater into rivers that become lifelines for nearby villages. Plastic-based clothes are rarely recycled due to blended fabrics and complex chemical treatments. True sustainable fashion requires natural materials, ethical sourcing, and responsible production. Repair, reuse, and resale culture must replace fast fashion's obsession with constant newness. Buyers must learn the hidden cost of synthetic garments disguised as cheap, disposable fashion. Industry reforms must mandate transparency, eco-labeling, and waste accountability in fashion. Plastic is not just in bottles, it is also in closets. Closets that are quietly polluting the planet now. 16. Rural communities and plastic waste. Rural areas once free from plastic pollution now face rising waste due to global consumer expansion. Cheap plastic packaging floods remote villages where waste management systems simply do not exist. Shampoo sachets, food wrappers, and single-use goods are dumped into rivers, fields, and forests. Livestock ingest plastic while grazing, leading to starvation, bloating, and painful internal injuries. Burning plastic near homes releases fumes that trigger asthma, respiratory damage, and birth defects. Open-air dumps become breeding grounds for insects, rodents, and diseases that threaten public health. Villages near landfills suffer from leachate poisoning their water and contaminating their crops. Many rural families rely on rainwater or shallow wells easily tainted by surface plastic pollution. Children scavenge trash for income, risking injury, infection, and exposure to toxic waste each day. Traditional practices like wrapping food in leaves have been replaced by disposable plastic pouches. Multinational companies exploit these regions by selling products in non-recyclable packaging formats. Rural leaders often lack resources or training to deal with mounting waste or toxic dumping activities. Government funding and cleanup efforts usually focus on cities, ignoring countryside contamination. Plastic clogs irrigation canals, floods farms, and even damages tractors and plowing equipment. Wild animals consume littered plastic bags, leading to deaths in forests once rich in biodiversity. Without urgent interventions, rural plastic waste will rival that of major cities in coming decades. Education, infrastructure, and waste collection must be extended to protect remote communities now. Rural resilience depends on clean land, water, and air, all compromised by plastic's quiet invasion. We must empower villages to reject single-use plastics and return to sustainable local solutions. Plastic pollution is not only an urban problem, it is poisoning the planet's most vulnerable people. 17. Plastic in religion and culture. Religious rituals and cultural festivals increasingly rely on plastic decorations and offerings. Plastic flowers, idols, and packaging now replace traditional items once made from natural materials. These synthetic substitutes are convenient and cheap, but cause lasting harm when dumped or burned. Sacred rivers are polluted with plastic after holy ceremonies meant to honor nature and the divine. Pilgrims discard plastic bottles and wrappings in forests, shrines, temples, and mountain trails. Many religious processions include floats, banners, and garlands made entirely of colorful plastic. Once the event ends, these items are abandoned, polluting rivers, lakes, and even sacred groves. Incense, candles, and offerings are now sold in plastic packaging that ends up littered near shrines. Plastic waste from religious gatherings is rarely collected, left to rot or incinerate in the open. In some areas, worship rituals involve burning synthetic materials that emit toxic, harmful smoke. Plastic beads and trinkets are given to children during festivals, later dumped or swallowed by animals. Spiritual leaders and faith communities have great influence and can guide followers toward change. Some temples and mosques have banned single-use plastic items from their premises entirely. Eco-conscious religious movements promote biodegradable materials in place of harmful plastics. Culture and faith must lead by example, showing reverence for the earth through plastic-free rituals. Festivals that once honored rivers now choke them with synthetic debris, reversing their symbolism. Spirituality and sustainability can coexist when traditions are adapted with nature in mind. Plastic pollution defiles sacred spaces that should inspire peace, reflection, and environmental care. It is time to restore cultural practices that align with ecological wisdom, not corporate convenience. True devotion protects creation, and that means saying no to plastic in every sacred celebration. 18. Ocean dead zones from plastic. Plastic waste contributes to the formation of ocean dead zones regions where life can no longer survive. As plastic breaks down, it creates nutrient imbalances that feed algae blooms and suffocate marine life. These blooms consume oxygen in the water, leading to hypoxia, where fish and other creatures cannot live. Dead zones are expanding across coastal areas, especially where plastic runoff meets agricultural waste. Piles of floating plastic reduce sunlight penetration, disrupting photosynthesis in aquatic ecosystems. Microscopic algae thrive in plastic-polluted water, absorbing light but releasing toxins as they die. When algae die off in massive numbers, bacteria break them down, using up available oxygen completely. Fish flee or die, coral reefs bleach, and once rich waters become underwater deserts void of movement. Plastic also smothers coral reefs directly, introducing bacteria that trigger disease and tissue loss. Ghost fishing gear like nets and traps continues killing animals long after being discarded at sea. Entangled fish and marine mammals often die slowly, decaying and releasing toxins into local waters. The combined effect of plastic, chemicals, and warming seas creates lethal feedback loops of decline. Dead zones impact fisheries, tourism, and livelihoods of communities dependent on clean oceans. Oxygen levels are falling in oceans globally, and plastic pollution accelerates this catastrophic trend. Plastic-rich sediment alters bottom habitats, displacing bottom dwellers and filtering species entirely. In many regions, bottom trawling stirs plastic-filled seabeds, clouding waters and crushing habitats. Oceans are meant to be oxygen factories, but plastic turns them into suffocating graveyards of silence. Reversing dead zones requires urgent action, cutting pollution and restoring coastal ecosystems. Plastic-free oceans are essential not just for marine life, but for planetary oxygen and food stability. If we continue polluting the oceans, we risk turning vast blue life zones into lifeless plastic cemeteries. 19. Tourism and coastal pollution. Tourism contributes heavily to plastic pollution, especially in coastal areas, islands, and resorts. Beaches popular with tourists often suffer from overflowing bins, litter, and unmanaged plastic waste. Visitors bring snacks, bottles, and packaging that are left behind or buried in the sand after trips. Plastic chairs, umbrellas, and disposable cutlery break down into fragments that enter nearby waters. Water sports and cruise ships discharge plastic and sewage into fragile marine ecosystems daily. Tourists buy plastic souvenirs and packaging-heavy goods that increase local waste beyond capacity. Coastal restaurants and vendors serve food in foam plates, straws, and single-use wrappings. Sunscreens with plastic microbeads are washed off swimmers, affecting coral and sea creatures below. Plastic bottles and containers are buried during storms, returning to shore in tides months later. Some beaches are now groomed with machines to remove trash, harming sand-dwelling wildlife. Many coastal regions lack infrastructure to deal with sudden waste surges during tourist seasons. Local economies depend on tourism, but often lack waste policies or education programs for visitors. Volunteer beach cleanups help temporarily, but do not address the massive waste from industries. Plastic waste ruins natural beauty, deters ecotourism, and harms wildlife that attracts visitors. Hotels must switch to refill stations, cloth bags, and compostables to reduce their plastic footprint. Tourists must be held responsible for the waste they create in places they visit and enjoy. Government bans on single-use plastic near beaches have proven effective in some nations already. Tourism should preserve, not pollute, natural beauty is not a backdrop for convenience-based habits. Only responsible tourism will allow future generations to experience clean oceans and pristine shores. We must choose travel that leaves nothing behind, not even a wrapper on the beach or bottle in the sea. 20. The global recycling illusion. The myth of global plastic recycling has lulled consumers into believing in a broken, false solution. Only 9% of all plastic waste ever produced has actually been recycled into new materials. Most plastic labeled recyclable is not economically viable to process or is too contaminated to reuse. Recycling facilities reject multi-layered, greasy, colored, or mixed plastics that clog their systems. Low oil prices make virgin plastic cheaper, discouraging investment in recycling plants and programs. Even in wealthy nations, recycling rates are low. Much of the waste is exported to poorer countries. These importing countries burn, bury, or dump the waste, often illegally. With little regulation, plastic shipped for recycling ends up in open landfills or burned near homes, releasing toxic smoke. The public thinks they are helping, but the system often fails before the bin is even emptied. Labels like recyclable do not guarantee that the material will be collected or processed at all. Contamination from food or mixing materials causes entire batches to be discarded instead. Recycling bins overflow with false hope, while companies continue producing more disposable plastics. Industry groups promote recycling to avoid regulation, pushing responsibility onto consumers alone. The truth is, we cannot recycle our way out of a problem caused by excessive plastic production. Most plastics are downcycled, turned into inferior products that cannot be recycled again later. Only clear PET bottles and HDPE jugs have a chance of being recycled effectively at scale today. We need to reduce plastic production drastically, not pretend recycling alone will fix the crisis. Governments must ban hard-to-recycle plastics and invest in truly circular, reuse-based systems. Until we address the production problem, the recycling story will remain a dangerous, profitable lie. True solutions lie in prevention, reduction, and reuse, not in the illusion of a working recycling model. 21. Plastics infiltration of airborne dust. Plastic particles are now found not only in oceans and soil, but also in dust floating through the air. Tiny fragments shed from clothing, tires, packaging, and buildings circulate through urban skylines. Wind carries microplastics from streets, landfills, and oceans into clouds and across continents daily. Rainwater samples in remote regions show plastic fibers falling from the sky onto untouched terrain. Atmospheric scientists detect plastic particles in snow on mountaintops and ice in polar territories. Indoor air contains fibers from polyester carpets, curtains, furniture, and synthetic clothing threads. Humans inhale microplastics constantly, especially in closed spaces with limited ventilation systems. Microscopic plastic in lungs may contribute to asthma, chronic coughing, or lung tissue inflammation. Factories, vehicles, and synthetic goods constantly release airborne plastics into the urban breeze. Plastic-infused dust can linger in the air for hours, increasing long-term environmental exposure. Particles settle on farmland, contaminating crops, and enter human bodies through inhalation and food. Research is uncovering links between airborne plastic and disruptions to immune and endocrine systems. Unlike larger litter, airborne plastic is invisible, making regulation and cleanup nearly impossible. As more synthetic goods are manufactured, the cloud of plastic dust will thicken over global cities. Air pollution policies must be updated to include microplastic levels and particulate plastic standards. Buildings, clothes, and tires should be redesigned to reduce shedding of plastic into public spaces. Ventilation systems in schools, offices, and homes must be enhanced to filter plastic from indoor air. Plastic's rise from streets to skies means even the atmosphere now carries the weight of our waste. We must face the truth. No element, land, sea, or air is immune from plastic's relentless invasion. The invisible presence of plastic dust proves our crisis is more widespread and urgent than imagined. 22. The impact on coral reef ecosystems. Coral reefs, once vibrant underwater jungles, now suffer from plastic that crushes and poisons them. Plastic bags, fishing lines, and debris settle on coral, blocking sunlight and halting photosynthesis. Sharp fragments cut coral tissues, opening wounds that invite deadly infections and bacterial growth. Plastic attracts harmful bacteria like Vibrio, which cause coral bleaching and tissue deterioration. Microplastics disrupt corals' feeding habits, confusing their polyps and limiting energy absorption. Reefs blanketed in plastic lose their vivid colors and become graveyards of broken, ghostly skeletons. Fish and creatures that depend on coral habitat disappear, destroying the entire reef food chain. Tourist activities often add more plastic to reefs, especially from boats, divers, and beach litter. Anchor damage and snorkelers stepping on coral further stress already fragile marine ecosystems. Some reefs are located near plastic exporting ports, receiving continual waves of foreign garbage. Reefs defend coastlines from storms, yet their collapse leaves regions exposed to rising ocean violence. As reefs die, fisheries suffer, affecting food sources and income for millions in coastal communities. Plastic pollution, combined with warming seas, acidification, and overfishing, accelerates reef loss. Restoration efforts fail if plastic continues suffocating coral faster than we can plant replacements. Plastic cleanup near reef zones must be prioritized to stop further collapse of these delicate systems. Bans on plastic packaging, foam products, and ghost gear should be enforced near coral territories. Education programs for divers, sailors, and tourists can reduce human-driven reef plastic impacts. Protecting reefs is vital not just for beauty, but for biodiversity, climate regulation, and food chains. Without action, coral reefs may vanish by 2050, victims of a plastic plague they cannot escape. Reefs are not just marine scenery. They are frontline casualties in the war against plastic pollution. 23. Rivers as plastic superhighways. Rivers are now plastic superhighways, carrying trash from inland cities to oceans with shocking speed. Urban streams receive plastic runoff from roads, sewers, factories, and stormwater drainage systems. Plastic litter dumped on land eventually reaches rivers through wind, rain, or deliberate disposal. Major rivers like the Yangtze, Nile, and Ganges transport millions of tons of plastic into seas yearly. Plastic travels hundreds of miles, snagging on vegetation, entangling animals, and polluting banks. Rivers flowing through slums or industrial zones are especially choked with foam, wrappers, and bags. Fishermen often pull up more trash than fish, as rivers transform into floating dumps of debris. Plastic clogs river engines, boat propellers, and irrigation systems needed for agriculture nearby. Floating waste traps methane and bacteria, turning rivers into toxic streams of chemical sludge. Plastic-coated riverbanks prevent plants from growing and destroy riparian habitats for birds. River deltas become dumping grounds, where plastic gathers before flooding the surrounding sea. Waste trapped behind dams or bridges collects into large rafts, attracting flies, disease, and vermin. River cleanup programs often lack funding or are overwhelmed by constant upstream pollution flow. Monitoring tools like drones and sensors can help track plastic movement and identify hot zones. Governments must enforce bans on dumping and support riverbank waste collection infrastructure. Plastic booms and barriers can intercept trash before it escapes into open waters permanently. Communities living near rivers must be empowered with tools and funding to keep waters plastic-free. Rivers once symbolized life, trade, and purity. Now they transport the waste of global excess. Solving the river crisis is essential to stopping the flood of plastic into the world's oceans. Clean rivers mean healthier oceans, safer food, and a better legacy for generations yet unborn. 24. Plastic and environmental racism. Plastic pollution does not affect all people equally. It disproportionately harms marginalized groups. Low-income neighborhoods often host landfills, incinerators, or plastic factories that leak toxins. These communities face higher risks of asthma, cancer, and birth defects due to exposure to plastic. People of color and indigenous groups are more likely to live near polluted waterways and waste sites. Plastic industries target vulnerable regions with factories, exploiting lax laws and political power gaps. Waste from rich cities is exported to poorer nations, forcing others to suffer for global consumption. Illegal dumping of plastic in minority regions reflects deep-rooted environmental injustice patterns. Residents often lack political representation or legal tools to challenge the plastic polluters nearby. Children grow up near mountains of trash, playing among plastic bags, bottles, and chemical barrels. Air and water tainted by plastic affect community health, yet cleanup resources are rarely provided. Environmental racism means some populations pay with their health for others' convenience and profit. Landfills are rarely placed in wealthy areas. Pollution follows patterns of poverty and discrimination. Activists in frontline communities are often silenced, ignored, or threatened by corporate interests. Solutions must involve justice, removing pollution and giving voice to those most affected by it. Laws must ensure no one's backyard becomes a sacrifice zone for another's comfort or profit. Global solidarity is needed to stop the cycle of dumping plastic problems on the powerless. Environmental protection must include human rights, dignity, and equal safety for every population. Plastic is not just a pollution issue, it is a mirror showing how unfair the world's systems can be. True change begins when no one is considered expendable in the name of progress or plastic. Only when justice leads the way will we create a clean planet where every community thrives equally. 25. The role of big oil in plastic production. Big oil companies are deeply involved in plastic production, turning fossil fuels into synthetic waste. As fuel demand declines, these giants invest heavily in plastics to maintain profits and global control. Plastic is made from petrochemicals byproducts of refining oil and gas into fuels like gasoline. Major companies now build plastic plants instead of oil refineries, betting on a plastic-based future. From pipelines to packaging, the fossil fuel industry ensures plastic demand stays high and growing. They lobby against regulations, support false recycling solutions, and shift blame to consumer behavior. Brand image campaigns distract from the truth. Oil giants fuel the world's plastic crisis for decades. 26. Plastic's role in climate change. Plastic production is a major contributor to climate change, often ignored in carbon discussions. Each stage of plastic's life, from extraction to disposal, emits greenhouse gases into the air. Oil drilling releases methane, while refineries pump carbon dioxide into surrounding communities. The energy used to mold plastic bottles or bags is powered by fossil fuels with high carbon output. Incinerating plastic waste releases carbon and toxic fumes, worsening air quality and climate health. Even so-called recycling processes emit heat-trapping gases during melting and remanufacturing. By 2050, plastic production may emit more carbon than all coal-fired power plants combined today. Greenhouse gases from plastics increase global warming, which accelerates ice melt and sea rise. Melting ice releases more trapped gases, forming a feedback loop that worsens planetary heating. Warmer oceans absorb more plastic toxins and weaken marine ecosystems already burdened by waste. 27. Plastic's threat to marine mammals. Marine mammals like whales, seals, and dolphins suffer silently as plastic poisons their blue world. Plastic bags and packaging are mistaken for food, leading to starvation or digestive obstruction. Whales wash ashore with bellies full of trash, their stomachs bloated with packaging and rope. Seals become entangled in fishing nets and straps, causing wounds, infections, and slow death. Plastic can lodge in blowholes, preventing breathing and leading to suffocation in open waters. Nursing mothers pass toxins from ingested plastics to their calves through contaminated milk. Plastic disrupts navigation, mating, and feeding habits, breaking social bonds in marine families. Noise pollution from cleanup machinery and plastic hunting vessels adds stress to mammal pods. Floating debris traps seals and turtles during mating season, cutting off circulation or escape. Dead whales often contain hundreds of plastic items, from bottle caps to cigarette lighters. The toxins from plastic weaken immunity, increasing marine mammals' vulnerability to disease. Fishing lines known as ghost gear drift for years, ensnaring everything from seals to sharks. Unlike fish, marine mammals surface to breathe, making floating plastic especially dangerous. Plastic also displaces prey species, forcing mammals to search farther and burn more energy. Loss of food and clean habitat shrinks populations, especially in Arctic and tropical regions. 28. Plastic in the agricultural chain. Plastic now infiltrates the food chain through soil, crops, and animals raised on synthetic landscapes. Farmers use plastic mulch to retain moisture and control weeds, but it degrades into toxic particles. Over time, these microplastics enter the soil, altering microbial life and disrupting plant health. Rain and wind carry plastic into irrigation canals, contaminating water used for crop growth. Plastic waste left in fields breaks into fibers that embed in roots, leaves, and edible tissues. Livestock graze in areas with scattered plastic, ingesting wrappers, bags, or synthetic rope. Poultry raised near dump sites peck at trash, swallowing shards that accumulate in their organs. Even organic farms may receive compost or fertilizer laced with microplastics from urban waste. Plastic fragments interfere with nutrient absorption and change soil structure over planting cycles. Crop yields suffer from hidden toxicity, reducing both quantity and quality of harvested food. Food stored in plastic containers or wraps absorbs chemicals like BPA or phthalates into flesh. These chemicals mimic hormones, affecting human development, fertility, and immune systems. Milk, meat, and eggs can carry plastic-linked contaminants passed through the animal's body. Plastic dust settles on open produce during harvesting, drying, or market transport activities. The entire farm-to-table journey is now tainted with invisible plastic fibers and residues. Consumers unknowingly eat microplastic with fruits, grains, dairy, or processed food items. Rural communities near plastic dumps report rising health issues, miscarriages, and deformities. 29. The illusion of bioplastics. Bioplastics promise a green future, but often deliver confusion, contamination, and false hope. Labeled compostable or eco-friendly, these plastics mislead buyers about their real impact. Some require industrial composting conditions, which most communities cannot provide or afford. If placed in regular landfills, they behave like traditional plastics, lasting for decades or more. Consumers toss bioplastics in recycling, contaminating entire batches with non-recyclable material. Others throw them into nature, thinking they biodegrade quickly, yet they persist in sea and soil. Bioplastics made from corn or sugarcane still consume farmland, fertilizers, and vast water supplies. Their production competes with food crops, worsening scarcity and driving up prices in poor regions. Many contain chemical additives that make them no safer than fossil-based alternatives long-term. Compostable does not mean ocean-friendly marine life still chokes on green wrappers and cutlery. The term biodegradable is loosely defined and often abused in advertising and product labeling. Without proper collection systems, these materials do more harm than good in public environments. Bioplastics give corporations a guilt-free pass without changing overconsumption or waste culture. Instead of replacing plastic with lookalikes, we must rethink design to eliminate disposability. Reusable systems, refill models, and zero-waste packaging are more effective than bioplastic swaps. 30. Microplastic contamination of drinking water. Our drinking water, both bottled and tap, is contaminated with microplastics from invisible sources. Studies found plastic particles in 93% of global bottled water samples across all continents. Tap water in major cities also tests positive for synthetic fibers, films, and fragments daily. Plastic can enter water through aging pipes, packaging leachate, or airborne dust during treatment. Even groundwater and springs once considered pristine now contain microscopic plastic residues. Bottled water absorbs plastic from its container, especially when exposed to heat during shipping. Plastic caps contribute microparticles when twisted open, adding to each sip we unknowingly take. Municipal filters cannot catch nanoplastics due to their minuscule size and chemical resistance. Showers, dishwashing, and laundry release plastic fibers into water that cycles back to our taps. Many filters remove bacteria and metals but ignore synthetic compounds and polymer fragments. These particles can breach intestinal walls, enter the bloodstream, and accumulate in organs. Scientists worry about long-term effects, including inflammation, toxicity, and cellular disruption. Children are especially vulnerable, as their developing systems cannot process these chemicals well. The bottled water industry, valued in billions, offers no accountability for internal contamination. Plastic in water raises questions of safety, regulation, and corporate responsibility in hydration. The plastic crisis doesn't stop at your trash can. It travels the world, polluting ecosystems and endangering life. Change starts with awareness and action. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if you believe our planet deserves better. Together, we can shift from pollution to solution, one choice, one community, one planet at a time.